I remember the smell of home before I even remember its walls. It wasn't made of bricks or wood. It was made of bread baking in the oven, my father humming an old tune, and sunlight slipping through lace curtains that danced with the wind. Every morning, my mother would open all the windows wide, letting the air carry in the scent of the garden, fresh mint, jasmine, and the soft dampness of earth after the morning dew. I used to sit on the front steps with my little brother, our bare feet brushing the warm stone floor, waiting for the sound of the kettle whistling. That sound meant the day had begun. Our home was small, but it held more laughter than space. My father worked long hours, but he always found time to tell stories at dinner, stories about kindness, about never turning away a hungry soul. He'd look at me with those steady eyes and say, "Norma, a home isn't rich because of what's inside. It's rich because of how much love it gives." And I believed him, because when we sat together, four of us around that old wooden table, our hands touching as we passed the bread, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. My mother had this habit of talking to her flowers as if they were her children. She'd whisper, "Grow strong, my little ones," while trimming the roses, and I'd giggle, thinking she was a little silly. But now I know she wasn't just talking to flowers. She was teaching me that care is a language too. In the evenings after supper, we'd all sit on the porch. My father would lean back in his chair, eyes half closed, and say, "Listen." And we would. We'd listen to the crickets, the rustle of trees, the faint laughter of neighbors a few houses away. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty, it was alive. I never thought those simple moments would one day become treasures I'd hold on to for a lifetime. Back then, I thought everything would always stay the same, that the laughter would always echo through those rooms, and my mother's garden would always bloom outside the kitchen window. But life has a way of changing the things we think are unchangeable. And though I didn't know it then, that house, that warm, breathing, gentle home, was about to teach me its greatest lesson. It began so quietly, I almost didn't notice. Homes don't break all at once, they whisper first. A little less laughter at the table. A silence that lingers longer than it should. A smile that looks full, but feels tired. My father stopped humming in the mornings. He'd sit by the window, staring at the garden with a cup of tea that always went cold. I didn't understand why, but I started noticing the small things. Letters that came in brown envelopes, my parents talking in low voices behind closed doors, my mother's hands trembling when she folded the laundry. Once, I found her sitting on the floor of the kitchen, tears running down her face, though she tried to hide them quickly when she saw me. I asked, "Mama, what's wrong?" And she said, with a smile that hurt to look at, "Oh, nothing, sweetheart. The onions are just too strong today." I believed her, because I wanted to. But even as a child, I could feel something changing in the air, like the house was holding its breath. Our garden, once full of color, began to fade. My mother stopped tending it as often. The jasmine vines grew wild, and the mint patch dried out under the sun. Sometimes, my brother would ask me why Mama didn't sing anymore while she cooked. I never had an answer. And then came the day Father came home early. His face looked different, not angry, not sad, just empty. He sat us all down and told us he'd lost his job. He said it softly, almost like he was apologizing for something he couldn't control. My mother didn't say a word. She just reached for his hand and held it. That night, the house felt cold for the first time. Even with the lamps lit and the fire burning, there was a stillness that crept through every corner. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sound of my parents talking, their voices trembling, breaking, whispering words I couldn't understand. I held my brother's hand and told him everything would be fine. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. It's strange how quickly comfort turns into memory. One week we were laughing over spilled soup, and the next, we were counting coins in an old tin box. My father started selling small things, tools, old books, anything we didn't need. But with every object that left the house, it felt like a piece of our story went with it. And then came the letter that changed everything. I still remember the sound of the envelope tearing, The way my mother's hand covered her mouth as she read it. I didn't know what it said, not then, but I knew it was bad. Because that night, my father didn't sleep. He just sat outside on the porch, staring into the dark, whispering to himself. That was the night the cracks turned into walls. The night I realized even the strongest homes can tremble. The morning it happened felt like any other. The sun rose slow and pale, and the wind carried the scent of rain. But there was something in the air, a heaviness that pressed against the walls. Even the house seemed to know. My mother moved quietly, folding clothes that didn't need folding. My father paced the living room, holding a letter in his hand, the same one that had arrived days before. My little brother played with his toy car on the floor, humming to himself, unaware that our world was about to change. When the knock came at the door, my father froze. Two men stood outside, strangers in pressed shirts and tired eyes. They spoke softly, politely, as if trying to be kind about something cruel. I didn't understand much, but I caught a few words: payments, deadline, eviction. My mother's lips trembled. My father tried to stay calm, to reason, to plead, but the men just shook their heads. And then they handed him another paper, the final one. When the door closed, silence filled the room. My mother leaned against the wall, her eyes shut tight. My father didn't move for a long time. Then he looked at us, at me and my brother, and said, "We'll have to leave by the end of the week." Just like that. A sentence so simple, yet it tore through everything we knew. I remember packing my things, one small bag at a time. My doll, a few dresses, a photo of our family in front of the garden gate. My brother cried when my mother told him we couldn't take all his toys. "But they'll be lonely without me," he said. She smiled through tears and whispered, "They'll be waiting for you, sweetheart." On the last evening, I walked through every room of the house. The walls still held our laughter. The floor creaked the same way it always did. Even the air felt familiar. Warm, safe, ours. I ran my hand along the doorway, where my father used to mark our heights in pencil. My name was still there. Norma, age 8. It felt like touching a memory that didn't want to fade. When night came, my father lit one last fire in the hearth. We sat together, not saying much. My mother held my brother, and I sat beside her, leaning my head on her shoulder. I wanted to ask why this was happening, why the world could take something so loved away, but I couldn't find the words. The next morning, we left. I turned around one last time and saw the house, quiet, still, watching us go. The curtains swayed gently, as if waving goodbye. That's when I learned something I'd never forget. A home doesn't fall apart when you leave it. It falls apart when you realize you can't go back. The place we moved to was small, smaller than I could have imagined. A narrow little house at the edge of town, with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors breathe. There was no garden, no porch, no sound of birds in the morning. Just dust and silence, and the feeling of starting over when you didn't want to. My father tried to make it feel like home. He hung our old family picture on the wall, even though the frame was cracked from the move. My mother put our worn table in the corner and laid a piece of cloth over it, smoothing the wrinkles again and again, as if pretending they weren't there would make everything fine. But it wasn't fine. The air felt heavy. The rooms echoed differently, like they didn't know our voices yet. My brother kept asking, "When can we go back?" And every time he did, my mother's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I used to hold him close and tell him, "Soon," even though I knew it wasn't true. Father found work again, small jobs here and there. He left early, came home late, his hands rough and tired. Sometimes he smiled and told jokes, but the laughter didn't reach his eyes anymore. The weight of what he'd lost clung to him, like a shadow. Mama started sewing for neighbors. She worked late into the night, the needle clicking softly, while the rest of us slept. I'd wake up sometimes and see her shoulders trembling, maybe from exhaustion, maybe from memories. There were moments when I'd close my eyes and imagine our old house. The sound of the kettle, the smell of mint, the way the evening light would spill across the living room floor. I'd imagine walking barefoot across the tiles, hearing Father's voice call from the porch. But when I opened my eyes, All I saw was the cracked ceiling above me and a window that didn't quite shut. Still, life went on. We learned to make do with less. We found laughter in small things, like when the roof leaked during rain and my brother and I pretended we were camping under waterfalls. Or when Mama burned dinner, and we ended up eating bread and jam instead, giggling like it was a feast. Slowly, I began to understand something. The heart can live in more than one place. Even when we lose what we love, some part of it lives inside us. In the way we speak, in the way we care, in the way we remember. Years later, when people asked me about that time, I didn't tell them about the hunger or the cold. I told them about how, somehow, even in our smallest, saddest days, we still found warmth. Because my father never stopped believing that kindness could rebuild anything. And my mother, she never stopped planting hope, even if there was no garden left to grow it in. Time has a quiet way of healing things, not by erasing them, but by teaching you how to carry them gently. The years passed, and so did the ache, though never completely. I grew up in that little rented house, watching my parents work harder than anyone I've ever known. We never had much, but we had each other, and that, somehow, was enough to keep us standing. I learned to help my mother sew. At first, my stitches were crooked and clumsy, but she would smile and say, "Even crooked lines can hold things together, sweetheart." And maybe that was her way of teaching me about life, that it doesn't have to be perfect to be whole. My father began fixing things for people, broken chairs, old clocks, anything that needed a pair of patient hands. He'd come home tired but proud, wiping the dust off his clothes, saying, "You'd be surprised how much life you can bring back into something everyone else gave up on." Those words stayed with me, because that's what we were doing, too, bringing life back into ourselves one small day at a time. There were nights when I'd sit by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, and think about our old home. At first, it hurt to remember it, like touching a bruise. But as the years went on, the pain softened. I began to see it differently, not as something we lost, but as something that shaped us. I realized that the walls we once lived in weren't what made us a family. It was the way my mother's laughter filled the room, the way my father's hands built things out of nothing, the way we held on to each other when everything else fell apart. There's a kind of beauty in losing, the kind that shows you what truly matters. I saw it in the kindness of neighbors who shared what little they had. I saw it in my brother's innocence, when he still believed we'd one day have a garden again. And I saw it in my parents, their quiet strength, their refusal to let life make them bitter. By the time I was grown, we had moved again, to a slightly better place, one with sunlight in the kitchen and a patch of dirt just big enough for flowers. My mother planted mint there. It grew strong, green, and wild just like her. And one day, I caught myself humming while I worked, the same tune my father used to hum on bright mornings long ago. It stopped me in my tracks. Because in that moment I realized the home I thought I lost had never truly left me. It had followed me, quietly, patiently, waiting for me to recognize it in new walls, in new mornings in myself. Many, many years passed before I went back. By then, my hair had turned silver, and my hands had grown slower, but my heart still remembered every corner of that old house. Sometimes memories stay sharper than time itself. One quiet afternoon, I decided to take a walk through the old part of town. I don't know what drew me there, maybe curiosity, maybe longing. The streets had changed, of course. Shops I remembered were gone, faces unfamiliar, trees taller than before. But when I turned the corner and saw that little lane, my breath caught. There it was, our house, still standing. Different, but still there, like an old friend who had aged gracefully. The walls were painted a pale yellow now. The garden was larger, blooming with colors I didn't recognize. A new family lived there. I could hear children laughing inside, a mother's voice calling them in for lunch. The windows were open, curtains fluttering in the breeze, just like they used to. I stood at the gate for a long while, my fingers brushing the cool metal. The laughter spilling out from inside filled me with something I hadn't expected, not sadness, but peace. For years, I had imagined this moment would break me, that I'd cry or ache, or wish things were different. But instead, I just smiled. Because somehow, seeing another family love that house the way we once did, it felt right. It felt like life had come full circle. I walked closer and saw that the old mint patch, the one my mother had planted, was still there. New and wild again. I bent down, touched its leaves, and the scent brought everything back. The mornings, the laughter, the love. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You grew again, didn't you?" A small boy came running out the door, chasing a red ball. He looked at me with wide eyes, curious but friendly. "Did you live here before?" he asked. I smiled and said, "A very long time ago, sweetheart." He grinned. "It's a good house," he said. And I nodded, my throat tightening softly. "Yes," I whispered. "It truly is." As I walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I finally understood we never really lose the places we love. They live inside us, in the people we become, in the kindness we pass on, in the stories we tell. That day, I didn't feel like I lost my home anymore. I felt like I had finally come back to it, not in walls or rooms, but in heart, in memory, and in peace.